The next of the product development life cycle stages is to figure out what you would need to complete it. To do that, you can adopt the following methods. Basically, I'm talking about requirement gathering. To gather the requirements, normally we use a lot of methods, out of which holding interviews, brainstorming with the team, create and distribute surveys and questionnaires, mind mapping, depend on focus groups, notice wireframes, analyze the relevant documents, listen to user stories. You do not need to follow any particular step, only to gather requirements. As long as the software engineers understand what you need as requirements, you can continue making the SDLC with exam. So, for example, we'll take one example, any live case. So you started one of the method that I have just mentioned. You use those methods to gather the requirements. Initially, what you get is an unstructured business and project information. That kind of unstructured data, you'll get it. Once you got the unstructured data, so it will be put into requirements analysis. That's the second stage of this requirement gathering. So once you move on to this stage, all these unstructured business and project information will be sorting. So we'll remove whichever is not required, or we will put it in a sequential way, which is required and what next, which feature is more important. And you have to put it all the features, like example login, and after you log in, you enter into the index, that's our main page. After the main page, the next thing is showcasing your products, and then you'll have feedback form. All, it's a sequential way. We'll sort the information in a sequential way. Once the sorting is done, then we'll put it back into the requirement analysis. Then finally you'll get a proper structured users requirements. This is how your requirement gathering works in real life. So you can tweak the requirements and make it more suitable for the future projects too. So following this focus on implementing the high level practical analysis of the project with the requirements. So coming ahead is planning. So here we have two types. One is one is scope management, other one is time management. Before going into that, let's understand what is a project planning. So after clearing the concept, the next obvious step is to create a plan. If the project is a large one, you have to create a completely full-fledged plan from the first step. Thus, it is better to start off with the smaller projects if you are a beginner. So it's more simple and easy to handle and plan. However, it's important to mention here that the most team focus on creating a customized approach to each project management program. So, first let us understand the two important components of project planning. So, if you see the first one, what we got is the scope management. And project planning, two important aspects are very important. One is how do you manage the scope, and second one is how do you manage the time. When the scope and time uh, goes in tandem with each other, goes in hand with each other, then we can get a proper project planning. So initially we'll take up the scope management. Scope management consists of the features that are required to be added, and then functionality to the product. So all the functional aspects and other aspects of the application. So in scope management, first we'll begin with uh, develop we'll develop a management team. Once team is developed, let's collect all the requirements that is related to the scope, and then we'll move on to the another step. It's defining the scope, and then finally we'll put into the action. That's called create WBS. Then the second aspect that I have told you, that is time management. Here again, define all the activities based on the time, and you put all the activities in a sequential way, and estimate the activity resources, how much time it will take, and what is your estimated time to complete the project. Then obviously estimate duration, hours, and finally develop the schedule. these are the two these are the two very important aspects of project planning. Of course, the develop management team is also important. So total three of this project planning aspects are develop management team, and then scope management, and then time management. Managing all these things, putting all these things together would bring a project plan. So now, thus you can go forward with using already present approaches like Kanban, Scrum variants. Let's look into these frameworks. What all these frameworks, from where they come, and how can we use? We'll discuss everything. Everything we'll discuss. So, and then you can make a completely customized plan instead, as for the main points that approved during the SDLC. Example planning there as follows. If you take one example that you can see on the screen, it's in front of you. So SDLC, this project planning goes like this. First thing is figuring out the scope of the project. That's the most important aspect. Then we have to set the milestones. That's the second one. Set the milestones. Once you set the milestones, estimate the cost and then time required. Economical, as well as that's the financial, as well as the time. Both the resources are must important. So then once you estimate the cost and the time, then we will identify the expertise and resources that you would need, also comes under this particular phase. So therefore, by the end of this SDLC phase, you may have committed to delivering on time the product in its complete form. Or you would have created the plan for project management. So in the case of the former, you would have to figure out how to work the project as per the organization's customs. So now we have looked into the project planning, and we have come up with a milestone, and we have come up with a date, uh, date when the project is going to be finished. So now, once everything's set, all plan is done. Now it is time to move on to the most important stage of SDLC. So that's the design stage of the software development life cycle. So you would notice two specific aspects. The most important aspect is UI and UX design, and then technical architecture. Before going into that important aspects of design stage, let's dwell the sub stages in design stage. So again, it begins with a situation analysis. Then we will move on to the design. Then we will, once the design is done by the UI UX designer, that will go to the manager for the for the approval. Once that's been approved by the manager, then we will move on to the next step, that is implementing and monitoring that. So once implementation and monitoring, let's go to the approval again, overall approval, and then final evolution, then we will implement and monitor it. This is how a project design will go through the different levels of scrutiny. Once all set, then only it goes for the final implementation and monitoring. This is a cycle of scrutiny in finalizing finalizing a design. And now, if you look into the most important aspects, the first two are UI and UX design, and then technical architecture of the complete product or that application. And in this portion of working through SDLC real life example, you have to probe the previously gathered requirements. Following that, you need to figure out the UI, that's a user interface design that would make the service or application functional. That is the prime objective of design stage. Plus, you need to create an architecture that can hold all the requirements in a way that would work for them. So now the designs that you would develop are in the following manners, or in another way, the most important artifacts that we use in design stage are workflow diagrams, and then wireframe diagrams, mockups, listed frameworks, technologies, and libraries, and documented description of the architecture. This is the final stage. You make a complete documented description of the products architecture, and we will send it for the approval. So normally we use a plenty of tools that are available in based on your company they prefer. Normally most of the people go with the Adobe, and Volvo goes with the Figma. That's what we do. We use Figma. So then, so following this, you can get started with after this your design is done. Now it's time for coding. This is our time. This is our coders' time, our developers' time. So, the next stage after planning, gathering, and designing, the next step of the software development life cycle template is executing the design that you have, no, that UI UX designer have created. So the programmers would start with the coding process on a day to day basis, selecting the framework of your choice. You have to continue with the development procedure at this point. So let's look into the sub phases of uh, software development life cycle.